Hi, I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and today I'm going to talk about house-based talismans. House-based talismans are really the height of astrological magic. They're the absolute most complicated thing to make. Um, they take a lot of practice, a lot of knowledge in terms of understanding how to put them together. They're very difficult to find the elections for them. The timing doesn't come up very often. And so really these require the highest skill of a traditional astrologer. Yet they're also some of the most powerful talismans that can be made. So, what is a house-based talisman? The most common astrological talismans are planetary talismans, and sometimes people are aware of fixed star or mansion of the moon talismans. So these are basically single-factor talismans. What you're doing is you're looking at those single celestial factor, and you're trying to capture the energy or contact the spirit of that when it's most powerful, at the most powerful, most astrologically auspicious moment. So, for example, for a planetary talisman, you'd want to have the particular planet rising or culminating, so in the eastern horizon or directly overhead, dignified by sign, by exaltation, or by multiple lesser dignities. For a planetary talisman, you want to have the planetary hour of the planet, and then also you want to have the factor unafflicted, which gets quite complicated, many different ways to be afflicted or unafflicted. So when we're looking at a planetary talisman, when we're looking to see what sort of effects or what kind of energy is going to come from it or what the spirit's going to do, we're going to look to the natural rulership of that planet. So, for example, for Jupiter, we'd be looking at wealth, prosperity, and good fortune, wisdom. For Mars, we might look at, we're looking for energy, for discipline, for victory. Venus, we're going to be looking for love, friendship, arts, pleasure, happiness, etc. And so again, I think that's fairly easy for people to relate to. They can kind of understand the natural nature of the planet, and then and that's the thing that the talisman is going to give you. Now, house-based talisman is different. They're based on the 12 mundane houses of an astrological chart, and each house relates to a different area of life. So the first house would be the person using the talisman or the business, if they're doing a business talisman. A second house would be their money, your profit, income. Fourth house, for example, would be home and real estate. Seventh house would be relationships, marriage, also clients, customers, business partners. Ninth house is spirituality and teachers, also long distance journeys. 10th is career, fame, reputation, marketing. And then 12th is secret enemies, etc., etc. So each of the 12 houses, each area of life, in fact, can be put into one or more houses. So the houses are, again, a little mysterious. What they are is divisions of local space. So, for example, the moon is going to be in a particular part of the zodiac, 12 Cancer, 15 Taurus, or whatever, for everybody in the entire world. So at any particular time, as the planets move through the zodiac, they're exactly in the same position. However, depending on your specific location and then the time of that location, the houses are going to be different. And which signs are on the houses and which planets rule those houses are constantly changing. So the interesting thing about the house-based talisman is it's extremely precise. And what I've learned from astrological magic is the more precise, the more fast-changing your electional factors, the more powerful that is. So, for example, waxing and waning moon. I mean, the moon is waxing or waning about half the time. So that's just not the most powerful or focused or precise predictor. And it's also not the most powerful or focused or precise astrological factor for a talisman. So, as I said, houses are divisions of local space. The ascendant, there's a cusp of the first house. The cusp is the boundary. The ascendant is the eastern horizon. And then the 10th house, which is also in most house systems the midheaven, directly overhead, that's the cusp of the 10th house. And then the 7th house would be the western horizon. And then the 4th house would be directly beneath your feet. Now, the intermediate houses, how those are figured out depends on the house system. And so this is one of the sort of vexed areas of astrology. And for some people, and I think it's fairly popular right now, houses seem to be almost the most important thing in astrology. It's like I've had people ask me what house system I use, and then based on that decide whether to be a student or not, which it seems odd to me. And again, this is just my opinion. I mean, everybody can have their own view of this. It seems to me that arguing about the house system is a bit like saying that my metric wrench is way better than your wrench that measures in inches. They're measuring systems. They all have different ways of measuring it. And what I do is to say, look, the house, use a house system that's appropriate to your school. And which again, if you're a modern astrologer, you're going to be like, well, what do you mean school? I do astrology. Well, that means you're a modern astrologer. So for modern astrology, you can use anything you want. The modern uses every house system, so that's fine. Use anything that you feel like. If you're a medieval Renaissance astrologer, then you're going to use an appropriate house for that school, which would be something like Placidus, Regiomontanus, Porphyry, Alcibiades. These are all house systems that were in use during this time. Hellenistic astrology is whole sign house, or that's really a Hellenistic thing. Again, people insist that the whole sign houses are best for everything. That's fine for them. They can choose to do that. But in my opinion, is that the houses that were actually used in that school at the time are best to use it if you're functioning in that school. But again, like I said, find what resonates for you. And if you think that houses are the absolute most important thing, and that's just key, then that's the truth. That's your truth that resonates for you. So as I said, with as we're using natural rulership for planetary talismans, the house-based talismans, what you have is, instead of using the natural rulership of the planet, I look at the planets in a house-based talisman a bit like a repertory theater company. So you've got these 7 actors, and they can play any of 12 roles. So any of the 7 planets can rule any of the 12 houses, and therefore can signify them in that particular chart. So what we're doing in a house-based talisman is we want the rulers of significant houses, the houses that we want to focus on, that we want the energy of, or we want the effect of. We want those house rulers to be dignified and unafflicted, and want the houses to be unafflicted as well. In other words, we don't want to have the south node in the second house, which is money, if we're doing an income-based talisman. So as I said, you have the rulers in the houses dignified and unafflicted, and then you connect the rulers of significant houses. So again, a dignified planet is going to be essential dignity and sign or exaltation, or multiple lesser dignities. Unafflicted would be typically things like not making and applying malefic aspect, like a square or opposition, not conjoining a malefic, not combust, within 8.5 degrees of the sun, not retrograde. But again, this sort of details, that's why traditional astrology is so complex. Now we would connect the rulers of the houses by having them make applying positive aspects, or by putting them in each other's houses. So for example, the first ruler of the first and the second would connect the first and second houses. That's called emplacement, and that's also a really important way of connecting the house rulership. So with your typical planetary talisman, you might have 4 or 5 factors that we listed. House-based talisman, you might have 10 or 15, so much more complicated. So the first example of a house-based talisman was going to be from Picatrix, and I'm doing this video in May of 2020. So while the video is probably going to be around a lot longer, Renaissance Astrology talismans are made in a very limited edition. We only have a very small number of them, and they all sell out. 100% of our talismans have always sold out. So you can check renaissanceastrology.com, look at our currently available talismans, and that'll let you know. We have a special section just for house-based talismans, and you can see what we currently have in stock. But in May of 2020, we currently have a couple of different types of house-based talismans. The first one is the Great Wealth Talisman, and we have that in a design, what we call a Western style design, which has an image on it. And then we also have an Arabic, which has Arabic sort of a magic square using the Quranic verses and the very powerful Arabic magic. These talismans, the astrological talisman strength, by the way, I was going to say, between the Great Wealth in the Western and the Arabic are the same. They were made at the same time. The interesting thing about the Great Wealth Talisman is that it is based on Jupiter and Mars. So those 2 planets then rule the first house of the user, the second house of money, and then the 10th house of success, fame, and also career. And so that's a very powerful talisman and a very useful one. So what we've just got in, just have available now, are these new love, wealth, and success talismans. Now these come from Thabit Ibn Qurra's De Magibus, and they essentially what we're doing is taking 2 different talismans, a wealth talisman and a love talisman, and we're putting those factors together. So this is even more complicated. This is a 4-house talisman. That is incredibly difficult to find. 3 houses is stretching it. 4 houses, boy, that's just completely out of control. Very hard to get. So in this talisman, this is the Love Well talisman, which you can see right here. The Love Well talisman has, in its chart when it was created and consecrated at that time, we had Libra rising, so Venus rules the first house, and Venus is dignified by sign and triplicity, so super strong. Mars rules the second house of money, and also the seventh of love and relationships, and is exalted. And the moon rules the 10th of success in marketing and is also exalted, as well as being dignified by face. So then Venus applies to trine Mars, and then the moon, it's a little bit of a stretch, but it is, for the moon, it has a little bit broader orb. The moon applies to conjoin Venus with reception. So this is both the traditional reception that requires an aspect, and then the one planet, maybe one of the others, major dignities or 2 minor dignities, that's traditional reception. But also they have what's called mutual reception, which is really, everyone goes crazy for that now. And it's mixed mutual reception with the moon being in Venus's sign and Venus being in the moon's exaltation. Actually, I prefer, rather than the term mutual reception, what Ibn Ezra calls it, which is generosity. And it gets confusing because people get confused between the traditional reception and then the mutual reception, which are actually quite different. Traditional reception makes the aspect go more easily. So we have, for example, if you had a trine, that would be the most positive aspect, would be a trine with reception. The mutual reception or generosity essentially substitutes for an aspect. So even though there's not an aspect necessarily, it connects the planets together. So, but interesting enough, in this talisman, which is nice to have the reception. So this Love Well talisman, Love Well Success talisman, is covering, like I said, 4 different houses. And so it's love, and as well, the 7th house of love also rules customers, clients, and also business partners. So this is a really, really great business talisman because it throws in connection to customers, positive connection to customers, and also good customers, as well as business partners if you're thinking about that at all. So really incredible. It's very unusual. Typically with an astrological talisman, they'll do one basic thing, and to have a love and wealth talisman is, again, very unusual. So definitely take a look at these on the Renaissance Astrology website, or as I said, if as time goes by, you'll see what else we have available under the house-based talismans. But these are really excellent examples of house-based talismans, and also how you can take the sources and then work with them. Because we're not following Thabit ibn Qurra exactly. What we're doing is taking 2 different talismans, putting them together, and making a super talisman. But you can see how we did that and how it makes sense, based on the way those examples work. So I actually do teach how to make house-based talismans in my full astrological magic course. This is in the really later lessons. You have to learn all about the essential dignities and aspects. You have to learn about houses. Have to have some real grounding in traditional astrology to do this. And all my students have always found this a challenging lesson, but also very exciting to work with and learn how to use this really incredibly powerful technique. As I said, the highest of high magic, the most difficult elections, and the most difficult and most powerful talismans that you can make in traditional astrological magic. So really fascinating. So you can get these house talismans from Renaissance Astrology, or you can take the full astrological magic course and learn how to create them yourself.